I've been wanting to do this podcast for a while, bringing in someone I consider to be an expert in this area. They've got definitely a track record of showing about how to help people in these cycles when there's addiction in the couples work. Talking to Dr. Chad Imhoff today.
Welcome to the Leading Edge in Emotionally Focused Therapy with your hosts, Dr. James Hawkins and Dr. Ryan Rana. EFT is a dynamic model that humbles even the most seasoned therapists. Together, we want to come alongside you as you continually push the leading edge of your understanding and application of this wonderful model developed by Dr. Sue Johnson.
Yes, definitely. This is a podcast I've been wanting to do for a while. Y'all know Chad Imhoff already. He's an EFT supervisor. He helped get the Arkansas EFT community going. He also does a podcast with his wife, Angela. Is it Connecting Couples?
Connecting Couples with the real Imhoffs.
There you go. Chad's also a member of the Success and Vulnerability team. And I just a person for whom I have a lot of respect. Chad does his caseload. If you get a referral from Chad, just be ready to work.
They do. No. I have some challenging cases. That is true.
Yeah. But what I appreciate, not only Chad is a skilled couples clinician, but he's also skilled at working with people coming out of addiction as well. And so just want an opportunity to interview him today. Just kind of pick his brain about EFT and working with addiction in the cycle.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me on. It's always interesting. My first thought when I think about addiction is like, well, what is that? And people always assume that I know what addiction is because I work with so many people that are quote unquote addicts. But for me, I'm always like, yeah, but what does that mean? Just like I wouldn't assume all depression is the same. I would think it's all over the board, right? When you talk about what is an addiction or what is addictive behavior or what does that look like. So I kind of want to break that down just a little bit. I really just mean anything that I'm doing maybe more than I want to or more than I intend to that has adverse effects in my world or in my life. And maybe I've tried to stop, but I haven't been able to. So I would think of more the old diagnosis of dependence. I think a lot of people abuse different things and maybe go to things that are there for comfort that maybe we shouldn't use. But when I really think about addiction at its core, I think of somebody who's really dependent on something to kind of function that they don't want to be dependent on also, that they're not proud of being dependent on. So when you say addiction, that's kind of what I think is like, man, I don't want to do this and I keep doing this and I kind of have this relationship with whatever it is that kind of perpetuates itself. We talked about this before we started, this addictive cycle. And really when you think about cycle in EFT, you think about a couples cycle and addictive cycles have been thrown around lots of different ways. People used to always talk about a cycle of addiction, like use and then moderation or swearing off of it. I'm never going to do this again. And then kind of this white knuckling phase. And then I mess up and then shame and then another vow that I'm never going to do it again. But that plays out, but it also overlays on a couples cycle. And that's something that we've seen play out lots and lots within one partner. And even if you were to expand it, within a codependent partner too. I know we don't love that phrase in EFT a lot of times, but a partner who's also kind of playing a role in that relationship to the addicted partner. Yeah.
Well,
I said a lot.
And it was good. I know when to be when it's working, just be quiet, Jay.
Oh man.
But no, I want to go. Thank you for clarifying how you even define addiction or begin to try and understand it. And then going to putting it in the cycle. Like, where do you see particularly, now this is where I want to pick your brain, Chad. Kind of help me understand, Chad Imhoff, when you're working, a couple comes in and says, hey, we struggle in connecting, and a huge part is because my partner is addicted to fill in the blank.
Yeah.
What's kind of your go-to? How do you orient it? How would you encourage people, how to work with addiction in an EFT framework?
I think, especially when you're thinking about addiction, it's really important to start on the right side of interaction. So I don't want to be the person telling a partner that they have an addiction. I never want to be the therapist saying, hey, if you're my client, James, I don't want to be saying, hey, James, you have an addiction and you know, me and your wife have talked about it and you need to change this thing. So I'm really careful if one partner comes in and says, hey, my partner does this too much. I really want to make sure that whoever the partner is that struggles with an addiction has some level of drive or motivation for change.
Okay.
I don't want to be on the wrong side of, you know, another person telling this individual to change.
Okay.
If I'm trying to drive change, if I'm trying to push change on somebody, I find that really, I'm just more of the same in a cycle. So I'm really careful about that. So the way you set that scenario up, it's a good setup because that's what happens a lot.
Like try and get you, like my partner had, like they've made the diagnosis, they're an addict, and we don't even know if they've come to that conclusion yet.
Yeah.
So your first thing is you want to make sure you're on the right side of interaction. Yeah. Meaning not just get triangled in against the other person.
Correct.
But what do you do? So the person says like they want to say addiction. I don't know, what's a reframe you might give or how you might work into that then?
So from the very start, in my attachment history, let's say, you know, I've got a couple that comes in and they've said, hey, we want to work with you, Chad, and we've got this going on, and they disagree. Like one partner says, I'm not an addict, and one partner says, you are an addict. Which happens. It happens to me probably once a week. Or once a month. I don't do that many intakes, but I get somebody in, and then in that attachment history, I really want to say, well, how does this work? Okay. You know, how does that thing, what purpose does it serve in your life? And I start to validate the reasons they might need or use or be dependent on something. And initially I'm already trying to tie that to their emotional processes, their emotional cycle. And I'm doing that in an individual session saying, well, what do you do when you feel overwhelmed or anxious? Or, well, I go do this. This works. This functions in my life.
Wow.
Does that make sense,
Yeah,
James?
it does. I like what you did. Like, you know, it's one of the things we learn in EFT, but like one, you don't even start trying to like, let me start off with a label and a term for you yet. Yeah. Before I even understand it. So you want to take a moment, not get in one triangled against the person, but also what you said, let me see how it fits into an attachment emotional process.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
I like that.
So I'll say, you know, if I get somebody in, I'll use a case that's a video that's on SIV, but it's one that we've used as an intake session, and the gentleman comes in, and it's our attachment history we're doing, and he says, "You're not gonna get me to stop smoking pot," right? And I'm like, "Oh, okay. Who said I was?" I'm like, "No problem, man." I'm like, "I'm just trying to understand. So what do you do? What does pot do for you? How does it function in your life? Well, help me get the good reasons you smoke pot." Like, I want to get aligned with his process. I believe that all behavior makes sense in context. So I have to believe that this gentleman's behavioral action of I go to this drug for comfort, that it makes sense. Now, he has had periods of abstinence from the drug. And again, I'm using a very specific case, but things didn't change relationally for them. And so he said, why would I change everything I'm doing? The places I go to get relief, to check out, to chill out, to have a good day. Why would I change all of that if nothing else is going to change in my whole world? And I said, I wouldn't either. And he's like, kind of catches him off guard. He kind of bobbles a little bit. And he's like, oh, well, okay. Well, as long as you know that you're not going to change that. I'm like, why would I take away something that's working for you if I don't have something else to replace it with? I have to start to understand how this addictive behavior functions. And I have to start to really kind of engage with this person's world before I start saying I'm going to pull something out. So my first, I guess, foray into this whole thing is that I want to say, I'm not taking anything away. I'm not going to remove something until I know exactly what it does for you. That's a super important point. And I think it would be crazy for anyone to say, hey, just abstain without having an option to do something different. A drug or alcohol or porn or whatever the thing is, it is serving some function in a person's life. It isn't just a bad behavior.
And I can see that going a long way for you working with the person who's identified as having an addictive behavior. Because at least you're coming towards them with some curiosity. I want to understand. And also you're assuming, hey, there's something reasonable here.
Yeah.
Maybe it's still having an impact on you that we got to be concerned about, but there's a reasonable reason why an intelligent, functioning human being keeps doing something here that maybe is or is not causing them a problem, but it's definitely causing a problem for the partner who's with them. And maybe, let's go ahead, we're going to take a break. And I appreciate how you even frame that unholding space for the person with maybe the identified addictive behavior. I'm putting air quotes up, everybody. But how do you also deal with the person's over on the other side, like, I am convinced it is, or maybe just once again, they're trying to show you that there's a problem for them that they're going through.
Well, I got to tell you, James, that's the beauty of working with couples. You get to use some of that to say there is a problem, even if the person who's addicted doesn't have the problem. We can talk about that.
Ooh, I look forward to it. It's an honor for Ryan and I to get to come to you on these airwaves, to meet you where you are with you and your clients who are pushing the leading edge in your clinical work. And we're thankful for this opportunity and for the work that you do. And we want to invite you that if you believe in the concepts of this podcast and you find them helpful, as we do, we just invite you to be able to invest and to help keep this mission and this project going. You can support us by going on Venmo and looking for @Left Podcast. That's @LEFT PODCAST Left Podcast. And you can show your support. Once again, if you yourself are... Do you like the content that you're hearing on this podcast? Well, we invite you to join us on successandvulnerability.com along with George Fowler and other EFT therapists and supervisors, where you get to get more thorough insight into these concepts and actually get to see it done. Once again, join us on successandvulnerability.com. All right, so coming back.
Yeah.
So the other person on the other side, while we've held space and not gotten on the wrong side of the interaction, in our attachment history, we can see where the addiction or the behavior or chemical substance came into be, and then also track it within the person's intrapersonal cycle about when it shows up, what's the function of it, what's the impact of it. But what about the other person who's saying like, hey, my partner keeps going to this thing, and they don't say, I wish they would say this, and I keep losing them.
Yeah. Well, and that's exactly my frame, James. I'm like, why is addiction a problem? And that's my question. Why is it a problem for a relationship, really? And it's because I lose the person. I'll frame it around pursuers and withdrawers. Oftentimes, the withdrawer is the person who's going to something outside the relationship, so drug, porn, any of the video games, phones, technology. I mean, there's all kinds of things that people go to for comfort that are outside the relationship. But as I go to that thing outside the relationship, if I'm the addicted partner, I end up leaving my partner in a place where they don't have me anymore, and they don't serve a vital role in the relationship, which one of the things that many pursuers would say is, I don't feel valued, I don't feel important, I don't feel seen, I don't feel heard, I don't, these kind of like view of self statements. And so it sets itself up perfectly for them to say, when they go away, it sends nasty messages about how I see me. It's really an abandonment of the relationship. And it does impact that other partner's view of self and their value inside this context. So that partner that sometimes gets labeled in a codependent frame, they're actually just saying, no, this is a relational need. And so they end up signing off on what's happening inside the relationship because they're like, well, I need to be known also. I want to keep this relationship alive. So they go along with this behavior because apparently their partner needs it and they still want to be valued in the relationship. So then it's like they set up this kind of together, they collude to set up this nasty cycle around addiction. And they don't mean to. Nobody means this. I don't think the addicted partner wants it this way. And I don't think the partner who's living with someone who is addicted wants it this way. But it does play out. And people have been talking about it since, the 20s, basically, that this process kind of plays out and people end up kind of supporting it. So, yeah, I mean, and I have to be able to, So this is the part, whenever I'm thinking about addiction or even the attachment early on, how do I tie it to a cycle, right? The attachment history with the other partner, I want to make sure that I give them the message that I see how nasty addiction has been for them relationally and emotionally, that your partner goes to some other place to get their needs met and leaves you, abandons you in a sense, by yourself with your emotional needs, with your longing, your desire to be valued and needed and wanted and cared for and all the things. And so I'm making sure that I'm setting up, again, not that we're going to attack the partner who has the addiction, because that doesn't work. The frontal assault on addiction doesn't normally work, but that we're going to be able to go, we're going to help you express your needs and have your partner understand the cost that addiction has played and what it's cost you in your life in this relationship. So I try to start to turn the conversation away from a drug and to an emotional need, away from a chemical and to a longing or a pain that needs to be expressed.
And I love that you would have gotten some of that in that attachment history, because now you took time and got curious. Oh, because when you say, what does this substance do for you? Oh, it just kind of empties my head out, gives me some space. Chad could just be sitting over there like, this is what they're needing.
Yep.
This is what they're longing for, or this is what they're coping with.
Yep.
Kind of thing. Okay.
Yep.
All right.
And that's before I ever get to real couple sessions. If I don't have that information, if I don't understand, if I can't put myself in this either partner's shoes who's supporting the addict, the person who's struggling, and say, I can understand why. If I can't understand why, if I can't make sense of it for them, then I haven't got enough information. I have to understand at a deeper level what their experience is. Same thing with the addict. If I can't understand why or what function that chemical or behavior serves in their life, then I need to continue to assess, because I have that information is key. If I don't have it, then I can't tie it to a cycle. Then it doesn't make sense relationally, and I don't have very many options going into couples work.
Wow.
Right?
Wow. Thanks, Chad. I appreciate that. And like what came up for me was I thought about a session I had where the partner had went through a time of some behavioral type addiction stuff, some chemical and behavioral. And then the way they said it was, because what you were just showing me, like can the person who maybe struggles with what we're labeling addiction for right now, can they see the impact it has on their partner? And for this guy, he got it. He was like, it's like I woke up from a fog only to see I devastated the people I loved. I was like, whoa.
Yeah.
What a description, and that meant something for his partner. When his partner heard it, they were shocked. I was like, have you ever heard that before? Like, I knew it was there, but I never heard him say it like that. And it was important for them. You get it. You see what I'm going, okay, you get it. And it really resourced her to then be more online for him.
Yeah.
But it was hard for her to do that when he could not see how her world was devastated in his time of addiction.
Yeah. I've got to say, James, I've been thinking about this a lot. And there's a nuance to this that I think gets missed. And so when you have started to understand, okay, this person uses some chemical or some website or whatever the thing might be, that I have an addictive process that plays out in my life, and I'm still somehow, and I really am talking about somebody who is still functioning. They don't need to be checked into rehab, right? And I have and it's somebody who has motivation to change on their own. They're like, I don't really want to do that, but I don't know what else to do, right? So this is the person I'm talking about. When we start to think about that addicted individual, we need to start really thinking about like what other function does the shame serve in their life of what they're doing. So a lot of people, I'll go look at a website, but then the next day I'm like, I lock myself down and I go work and I function, and the shame drives a behavioral response that works in their life, which I hadn't heard a lot of people talk about. And so this behavioral response is actually functional. And so when they stop the addictive behavior, they lose access to this hugely motivating, for the wrong reasons, by the way, but hugely motivating shame. and then they don't function the same way. And then they look like, I want to say, a lost puppy in the world, like not knowing how to get motivated, where to go, what to do. And I'm like, so we have to kind of address some of the places where people, it's not as simple as, oh, if we remove the drug, life is better. That's just not true. We have to have things to go to, ways to find motivation, and ways to engage with ourselves, what we feel, and get it responded to.
Chad, you're firing off so many ideas in my head. Because one, so I appreciate, let me make sure I retract I go back to some of the things you said. A good job in the attachment history of thinking maybe about some of those substitutionary kind of like attachment, comfort, like, then there's the part about you trying to find the function of it in their system in the cycle intrapersonally within themselves and also within the relationship. But then the one you just brought up that was good is like also making room to explore, what if you don't have this move? What if you don't have this? What does life look like?
Yeah.
Wow, that's a big one. That's a big one. Okay.
Lots of people say, tie it to the emotional cycle. But if we tie it to the emotional cycle and then we pull out a big motivating factor as well, like shame, right? And we don't have this push, what does life even look like?
And that's the other thing you got me to see. And then what happens, not only just once now they use, that's the end of that cycle. Follow it all the way out, because there might be a point where they completely disappear for months because of regret. Yeah. Or like you said, this one, it almost has this, I feel so bad I did that. Now I overperform. And now it almost becomes a drug to like later somehow make them kick into gear and overperform. It's weird, right? I never thought about that. Yeah,
well, and I will tell you, all the diagrams I've seen of an addictive cycle have some form of, shame down here at the bottom, like, oh, shame, and then promise that I'll never ever, right? But I don't think maybe this is just me, James, I have never fully understood that shame actually is functional in an interesting way, because there's also an offshoot that says, and that's how I maintain my life. And that's how, even with this addiction, I continue to function. I function at a high level, and then not only the shame, but then this high level functioning based on shame causes me to go need more relief. So it fits there, but I'm like, I don't want to pull out shame or pull out addiction without knowing what it was doing in my life first. And I want to make sure I explore the full cycle within the relationship, but then within just the addictive cycle also.
Okay. And I want to make sure while we have your time here, and what are some other like maybe points of clarification or encouragement you'd like to give us about working with, particularly thinking here about a couple and addiction as a component of it? Any other special, like, I guess, intervention or focus considerations?
Well, you've heard people say, tie it to the cycle. And I want to make it really clear what that means. And so I work off of, TEMP. So trigger, emotion, meaning, protection. I think if you're listening to the podcast, you probably heard that before.
And make sure, because George will
organize it.
And Chad's going to organize it. Okay. For tempo. All right, go ahead.
O. And but we're gonna go. I'll use it. I'll say, you see this thing happen outside you on your partner's face. You feel this thing internally, and then your body tells you this is what it means. And then right at that protective action is where you're gonna find their addictive behavior. So they'll have this protective response, which is normally, I'm going to say, pull back, get a little distance, right? And then what do you do with what you feel is the next question. What do I do when I feel that? Well, I get rid of it. You know how I get rid of it? Drug of choice. And so in that place, you see this, you think this, you feel this, and you believe these things, and then that's what you do. You go away and you go get high, or you go get a drink, or you go get, and which in culture is pretty common. You had a bad day, James, you come home, you pour yourself a drink, have a drink, and it's okay. But for somebody who struggles with addiction and doesn't know any other way to get rid of what they feel, what's happened is they built that into that tempo in a way that says that P becomes not only just a protective action, it becomes a behavioral response to what they feel. And alcohol literally does numb you. Opiates numb you. right? Speed gives you euphoria. I feel way better, right? Methamphetamines, for instance. I'm like, so there's lots of ways that this is actually really, addiction is basically an emotional response process that we've used to cope with what we feel. Every addict I've ever talked to does that. And it's so predictable and it's so obvious in some ways that I think sometimes we just throw it out there like, oh yeah, just tie it to the cycle. Especially people that work with a lot of addiction. But I'm like, literally, it is a protective action. It's an action to deal with what I feel.
And in our context, now, once again, we're not trying to answer for all of society on this.
No.
But for us in our clinical setting, and we're thinking about processes or these behavioral processes that get in the way of the couple's bonding process.
Correct.
So the other partner might say, this is not a problem for me. Another person's like, yeah, but you're going over there to this process or chemical, and I'm not allowed into that part of your life. Or because you're able to do that, then you don't have need for me, kind of thing. I know.
That's good. James, I'm like, at that moment, I want to tie it back to, and this, what I'm trying to give you is an option, right? I'm trying to give you another road that isn't chemical A, B, or C.
That's right.
And give you a way that you can share what you're feeling in that moment with a partner who can respond with comfort.
That's right.
Because they generally have not had that in their life. And whether that's, trauma or just family of origin that had lots of struggles around responding to pain. But that's what people are needing, is they're needing an emotional human response to what they feel versus a drug to numb it or get rid of it.
I feel like I need another conversation with you to ask more questions on addiction, but I do got to let you go, man. Chad,
yeah, man.
Thanks
for having me.
Yeah. And I think both of us, we wanted, a great new resource that's out in the EFT community. Michael Barnett, who's an EFT trainer out of the Los Angeles area, just released his EFT and addictions workbook.
Yep.
So
I've gotten it. I've read some of it. I've gone through a little bit of it. It's great. You should check it out if you get a chance to.
All right.
Definitely.
Well, thank you all so much for pushing the leading edge of your learning.
Welcome to the Leading Edge in Emotionally Focused Therapy with your hosts, Dr. James Hawkins and Dr. Ryan Rana. EFT is a dynamic model that humbles even the most seasoned therapists. Together, we want to come alongside you as you continually push the leading edge of your understanding and application of this wonderful model developed by Dr. Sue Johnson.